Good evening and welcome to the March 6th, 2025 Parks and Recreation Commission regular hybrid video meeting. The time is now 5 p.m. My name is Peter Struck, Park and Recreation Commission Chair. Tonight, the Park and Recreation Commission meeting is in person at the Mercer Island Community and Events Center, and we are also using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this week. Public audience members may be watching the meeting in person at the Mercer Island Community and Events Center, by telephone, or online. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones and will the city staff please call the roll?
Here.
Here.
Commissioner Westberg,
Here.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Here.
Vice Chair Burstein,
Here.
Chair Struck.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. City staff, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the commission this evening?
No, Chair, there is not.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will turn to the first item on the agenda, which is the staff liaison report and planning schedule update. And for that, we welcome our recreation manager, Mr. Ryan Daly.
Good evening, commissioners. Let me bring this up. Oh, it popped up quick. Awesome. Thank you. Just a couple of project updates tonight. Clark and Groveland Beach joint planning process on March 18th. Staff and the Burger team will seek city council direction on next steps for that joint planning process. The discussion will include reviewing those existing conditions, a summary of the community input received through the background surveys, and also requesting the city council provide that feedback and direction on the next steps of the project and further community engagement. The agenda packet will be updated and updated on Let's Talk on March 12th. Playground replacements. R&R Construction finished the site demolition last week, and after the contractor completes the additional surveying, they will move on to grading the site and installing new drainage system. Please visit the Let's Talk page for additional construction updates on the Roanoke Park project. Additionally, the First Hill project, new play equipment was delivered and staff submitted for permits for the playground renovation last month. And the project is still on track for construction later this spring. Dean's Children's Park, I know this is one a lot of you are following very closely. The project's Let's Talk page will launch next week, and the city council will receive an update on the public engagement plan on March 18th as well. We have scheduled a community open house that will take place Saturday, May 3rd at Island Park Elementary, and we'll provide more details to the commission as we get closer to that date. And that information can be found at the link below. This is Sam's least favorite topic. You heard about this last meeting, but I wanted to provide a bit of an update on the repairs that have been done to some of these turf areas. You'll recall that this European chafer beetle has been a food source for raccoons and birds and different varmints, I guess you could say, out in those areas, specifically at Aubrey Davis Park and at South Mercer Playfields. The crews really have done a great job of going out and breaking up those clumps, and you can kind of see that in that picture down below where they've graded things out, added some additional topsoil and grass seed. So we're expecting that later this spring to sprout up. We are still having some challenges even with that. These animals have identified this as a food source. So the park maintenance crew is doing an excellent job going out there and continuing to refine that area as we go forward. Our anticipation is that once that grass starts to take, that's going to kind of keep that area a little bit more level and be better addressed as we go through later into the spring. So we've been working with most of our user groups on this. This week is when we've kicked off our spring season. So of course those fields are getting full and packed with young athletes. And so we're managing that area accordingly and staying on top of it. A couple other park maintenance updates. Sam, would you like to talk about the storm cleanup? You guys did a ton on that.
Yeah, I mean, from November till
just the last couple of weeks, we've had continued storm cleanup going on, wind and everything. So it's kind of not quite the sunny spring season with all the nice weather we like. We're still kind of holding on to some of the stormy weather. We have had a lot of questions on specifically like in the open spaces and big brush piles and debris and things like that. It's typically our practice, in Pioneer Park and the rest of the open spaces, we will clear that stuff out of trails and as it relates to things like safety, especially. But in general, we do leave that material in the open space. So people have brought up concerns or, just questions with, what's going on in California and things like that and fire. We did go into this pretty extensively in Pioneer Park with our fire department in 2022, and we did update the fire management portion of the Pioneer Park plan. And we worked with the fire marshal and the fire department to, identify what they could do to respond to an issue there. So in general, the layout of the city and where hydrants are, the main priority is to protect structures, protect, neighborhoods and things like that. And they're able to do that. So if you want to look more into that plan, there's more information, but at an issue where if it did come up, which would likely be, human caused, there could be a situation where, the central part of the open spaces might be allowed to burn and then, they'd be able to attack it from the outside and protect the neighborhoods and everything like that. The fire department's literally across the street. So I think we're in a good position with some of these relatively small properties, in contrast to wilderness areas and national forests and things like that. So it's just for both ecological reasons and economic as well. It's not really feasible to, remove that material out of the open space. It's better to let it decompose on site. And then just a bunch of we got a ton going on right now. We got some new restroom partitions in Luther Burbank Park in the restroom there. We just finished a landscape rehab on North Mercer Way, and we incorporated something called biochar into the soil, which is something we're trying out. It's basically charcoal. It's supposed to help retain water and plant health. So we're interested to see how that helps. Installed a yard hydrant at the P patch, doing a bunch of pressure washing, restroom painting, in addition to turf maintenance, just as we get into the busy season.
Thanks, Sam. Couple upcoming events to highlight. The spring recycling event returns. This is a great event, takes place at the boat launch on March 29th. Please take a look if you have items to recycle. Excellent opportunity to do a bit of spring cleaning ahead of March 29th and dropping those items off at the boat launch. More information can be found on the bottom of that slide. And I see the commissioners all writing this down very quickly. We also have a mobile blood drive on March 10th, 10:30 here at the community center. This is an event we partner with the Chamber of Commerce as well as Blood Works Northwest. If you're interested in giving blood, it is very, very appreciated. And you can go to that link below to create a reservation and to schedule. Some good news. I'll take this one, Sam. Actually, Sam's crew as well as our HR department worked on a seasonal job fair for Public Works. About 30 candidates came across the 2 sessions. The park maintenance team was able to identify a short list of candidates to conduct some additional interviews over the next couple of weeks. Overall, this was a really great success. Being someone here in the community center and seeing these individuals come in and being able to sit down with a number of our public works managers, I think was an outstanding opportunity. And this is one of the few times I've seen this happen here at Mercer Island, or at least at the community center. I think it was really, really well received. And also an educational opportunity for our other patrons and residents who are coming to this facility to see the active job recruitment that we're putting forward. Senior Resource Fair. This was another outstanding event. This took place last Saturday, where Island seniors, their care partners, and families joined us for the 2nd annual opportunity and fair here at the community center. We had information on staying active, health and safety discussions, over 55 vendors. That's a really phenomenal amount for us for an event that takes place here in the community center. So they were spread across the whole upper area. My estimate is that we had somewhere around 500 people come by the community center on that day. The parking lot was packed throughout and it just went extremely well. Couldn't happen without our sponsors and our partners with the YFS department. It's a great collaboration, meeting the needs of our island seniors. And I'll give you just sort of a quick anecdotal story that I was standing at the front. A woman walked in and said, I was here last year with my husband. He had dementia. It was an outstanding event. Unfortunately, he had passed away. And they had been here last year looking for resources for him. She had returned this year looking for resources for herself to get out and become more active. And so, you know, for me and thinking about Parks and Recreation, that's really what this is about, is connecting people. And so it was a great conversation that I had with her, and she just kept saying how much she appreciated the opportunity to have that event. So excellent event. A lot of help from our police department as well, being present and sharing information on emergency management and community policing. Really quick on the planning schedule, you'll notice that April has a to be determined. That is sort of to be determined after this meeting. We'll kind of decide where we go in April. The May 1st meeting, you'll notice I removed the MICC fee waiver policy. We're gonna wait a bit to bring that forward to the Parks Commission. We're working through some staffing changes here at this facility. I'm hoping to bring that forward at the June meeting when we do the chair elections, and KCLS will also be providing their annual update. And then the July meeting will determine if we need to add items to that, or if that's an item that we don't have agendas for, or an agenda that we don't have items for. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Our second item on the agenda is to review and consider approving the minutes from our February 6th, 2025 regular hybrid meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarthy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we have a motion by Commissioner McCarthy and a second by Commissioner Westberg. Commissioners, does anyone have any questions or comments before we vote? Seeing none, would you please turn on your microphones, and will the city staff please conduct a roll call vote again?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Hay,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson,
Aye.
Commissioner Cohen,
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Burstein,
Aye.
Chair Struck.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
The motion passes and the minutes from the February meeting are approved. The third item on the agenda is the Park Zone Development Discussion. And for that, we welcome our city manager, Jesse Bond.
Good evening, commissioners. Welcome back I was trying to remember what meeting this is. 4 or 5 on the Park Zone. We're getting close. All right, well, I'm going to do what any responsible leader would do and turn the floor over to Carson, who has been working on this since the last meeting. I did want to just touch in real quick. We had a very last minute change on the section in the draft code on buildings. And just to explain what happened, Kim, our very helpful outside legal counsel, was on vacation for a week in February. We took her off the email string and we forgot to put her back on last week for a final review. But she worked on it this weekend and caught some things that we realized needed to be addressed. So we'll walk you through the changes we made. If you saw my email this afternoon, I'm not expecting that we can totally wrap this up tonight, given that we surprised you with some new text today, but we'll see how far we get and then we can talk about what comes next. All right, Carson, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Good evening, Parks and Rec Commission. Carson Hornsby, Management Analyst. We're back this evening to continue the Park Zone discussion. Jesse gave us a pretty good overview of an introduction there, so I'll just jump right into the agenda. All right, so we're planning to, or we have a staff presentation prepared this evening to cover the Park Zone development regulations. And within that are a few follow-up items from the February 6th meeting, which include signs, scoreboards, impervious surface, and lighting. And then we have a new section for building size standards to unveil this evening. As Jesse mentioned, it's a last minute addition. However, the only changes that we made are in regards to the buildings. So all of the other revisions, the redlined copy that you received originally in your packet, all of those changes transfer over into this version. After we cover buildings, we'll take a look at the draft zoning map, which includes all the park properties that are proposed to be included in the park zone. And then we will wrap up this evening by taking a look at the handoff memo. And we're looking for feedback from commissioners on any revisions to the memo that you'd like to see between now and the next meeting. All right, so we'll start off with some follow-up items from the last meeting on February 6th. The first follow-up item that was identified was signs. If you recall, the staff proposed a range for size of signs, a limit to the size of signs from 16 square feet to 18 square feet. This was based on the sign at Mercer Park. However, we remeasured that sign and discovered that it was much larger than we originally thought. It actually came out to 21.5 square feet. However, this sign is a unique example in the park system. And so the staff don't necessarily feel that the regulation for sign size necessarily needs to be based on this example. And so our new recommendation is a limit of 16 square feet for a limit on signs. And this would allow all other existing signage in the parks to be conforming with this regulation. So we are looking for some discussion and a thumbs up or thumbs down on the proposed regulation for signs. So Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Commissioners, any comments or discussion on the staff recommendation on 16 square feet? Vice
So
Chair.
if the Mercerdale Park notice board is non-conforming, once it decays, gets ruined, then it would be brought back to the conforming size? Yeah,
That is correct.
okay, thank you.
All right, so just thumbs up if we concur. All right,
Sounds good. Thank you.
next topic.
All right, so next up is scoreboards. These are sort of along the same lines as signs, except it's sort of a unique example. So we felt the need to call these out specifically in our development regulations. It's under the signs section. We covered the only scoreboard that currently exists in the park system at Island Crest Park at the last meeting. And there was some questions from commissioners regarding the full size of that scoreboard to include the lettering at the top. And so we remeasured that, and we are proposing a new recommendation of 250 square feet, which encompasses that entire scoreboard, including the lettering. A couple other revisions that we made to the draft are to specify that electronic scoreboards are permitted and also externally lit scoreboards. And what I mean by externally lit is it's a bit hard to see in that bottom right-hand photo. However, if you see these poles here, these are lights that shine up onto the scoreboard. So essentially, externally lit just means that a light is detached from the scoreboard and shining up on it so that you can see the lettering, good visibility from all the way out there in left center field to where most of the people are watching the game closer to home plate. So those are the recommendations from staff. Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments on the scoreboard? I have one, just to your last point regarding having the light poles shine down. there is separate code, I believe, in the city code regarding how late those or those light posts can be on and so forth. Do you, like 10 o'clock or something like, I don't know, or can they be on till midnight? I just, it's more curiosity than anything.
I don't believe that's in our code. I believe that's in our, is that in our park ordinance?
Okay,
All of our rentals are, it's 10 PM is the
Okay.
latest, the lights can be on.
all right, thank you.
That rule exists somewhere. If you give me a few
Yeah,
minutes,
I
I'll find
code,
it.
yeah, in some governing document, I'll just
Yeah.
use, maybe that's a better term. Okay, just quickly thumbs up then on this sign scoreboard, all right?
Okay.
2 for 2.
Peter,
Oh, sorry.
Want to
Can
just
I-
jump in next?
can I-
Commissioner Cohen has a
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can keep
comment.
going.
I have a question that back on signs, and this subject comes up later on in buildings, but on signs and kiosks, 1C uses the term natural colors. And I thought that's a no-no now, given the response on the building comment. So it comes up, it's in the open space zone,
Yeah.
it's in the, a number of other things. And it jumped out at me, given the strength of the response in the matrix on that point.
Yes, what Commissioner Cohen is referring to is new state legislation that requires our development regulations across kind of all subject areas, whether it's residential development code or like the park zone, to be very specific. I'll give you an example. In the town center, when businesses come in to occupy a space, we've reserved a number of decisions for the design commission, right? Because aesthetics are hard to regulate. Much of this is slowly being taken away, and our regulations are going to become much more prescriptive. So we were wrestling with this today. I don't have a fix for the natural colors verbiage yet. The city's code, the whole code is going to be scrubbed to address this new bill. We can tighten up the definition of natural colors. I haven't had an attorney look at it. If Kim's here, she's welcome to opine. Or by the time I see you at the April meeting, I will have a more polished response on that.
Thank you, because like I noticed in the city code sign 1912-080, it uses terms like distinctive in shape, or of high quality, attractive and functional, compatible with their surroundings, et cetera. And again, I'm not going to give a legal opinion on these things, but some of them could raise the same issues. So you're saying that's sort of a work in process throughout the code and
Yeah,
these ordinances.
I'm in a little bit of denial of what we have ahead of us to address that new state law. But yes, all of that code language is likely changing.
Commissioner Markson.
Sorry, I should have asked this before we did the thumbs up, but is there a limit on how many scoreboards could be in a given park?
That's not addressed in the current draft.
Okay. And same for signs.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I guess moving on.
Okay. All right, next up is impervious surface. The Parks and Rec Commission had a discussion on impervious surface at the last meeting, and there were a few new exemptions that were proposed. Before I get into that, I just want to run through the list that we had at the last meeting, just as a quick refresher to this standard. The impervious surface standard, I think the general definition there at the top is, you're all familiar with that. So the exemptions that we have are approved master plan improvements. This will allow the city to undertake a public process to add a new amenity. ADA transition plan improvements are also proposed as exempt to accommodate federal regulations around ADA. Emergency access is exempt to ensure that emergency first responders are able to access the park. And public trails are exempt because any surface other than natural soil is considered impervious. Synthetic turf fields are also exempt because it's a long-term strategy to address demand for athletic fields and also helps increase field capacity within the park system. And then lastly, utilities are proposed as exempt because they're essential facilities and they require impervious surface to function correctly. The new exemptions that were discussed at the last meeting are included in the revised draft. These include playgrounds, emergency construction or maintenance, or small park amenities such as things like benches, picnic tables, and fence posts. And then in addition to that, we've also proposed some new language on, in regards to a potential new park property. There were some questions that were raised at the last meeting on, what the process would be to determine impervious surface coverage at a new park. And so we are proposing that be a separate process to determine that initial impervious surface coverage. And then once that park is, initially built out, then it would be included in sort of that baseline impervious surface throughout the park system. Before I get input on that, on the new exemptions, I just want to run through a few examples. And we're looking for some feedback on, where, if a cap or a limit to this is, if the PRC is interested in that, we're looking for some feedback on that. But as of now, in the current draft, we left it a little bit more open-ended. So a few examples of small amenities that we're thinking of include up here in the top left, this is a little statue. That's a footprint of about 2 square feet. This bench, what looks like it's a part of a larger pathway, I think close to a playground it looks like. This piece right here is 33 square feet. Trash cans, commonly found throughout the park system, have a footprint of 4 square feet. Fence posts vary from fence to fence, I would imagine, but this particular one is 3 square feet. There's couple different examples for picnic tables. One is this square model, approximately 50 square feet, and then another which is a circular base there, which is approximately 80 square feet. The flagpole, I believe, is the same exact concrete pad as the picnic table just mentioned at 80 square feet. And then there are some other examples of benches that don't have a full concrete pad beneath them. It's just the posts of the bench. And so that this takes up 3 square feet. So I think we're looking for some feedback on, where we'd like to cap this, or if we just want to leave it open-ended with a few examples as it currently is in the draft. Chair.
Thank you. Any input on the issue of providing a cap? Commissioner Cohen?
Like, how would you word that if we were inclined to do that? I mean, I can't quite think of how that would work.
Something along the lines of small amenities up to X square feet in surface area or gross floor
Are
area.
exempt.
Yeah. Oh, you weren't talking about number per acre or something like that. You were talking about
The
size.
Yeah,
Okay.
the size of the
Thank you.
impervious surface beneath the amenity.
Commissioner Hay?
I think it would be hard to put a cap on this because I recall with Mercerdale, the number of benches that were put into place became part of the design element and they didn't want too many benches. And I think these fixtures are always taken into consideration in terms of where they're needed and not overloading the park with fixtures. But, say you have an area of the park where garbage continues to accumulate, well, you probably need a garbage can there, so we would meet the needs of that. And if you've got a cap on this, it's really hard to meet the needs of our parks as they evolve over time. So I think I trust the our current process for this.
Commissioner Marks. Commissioner. Left, right. Commissioner Marks.
Not to say I don't trust the city, but I do think that having a size on what constitutes a small park amenity makes sense. And potentially for clarity, like how many combined square feet of small park amenities you might expect. Anyway, thank you.
Commissioner Westberg.
To me, seeing these examples, as well as the extent of the exemptions that are currently listed, really brings, in my mind, the question of why we need an impervious surface development standard in there. It's hard to imagine situations where any significant development would be.
Rory, is your mic on?
Yes,
Okay, there we go.
my voice may not be, but
There we go.
the mic is. It's hard to imagine circumstances under which any significant developments which would involve impervious surface would be proposed that wouldn't fall in one of the categories that we currently have as exemptions, either because they went through a planning process or are part of a master plan, or they went through a different process and were approved by the council. And these are a great example of how, in order to manage a park system that is dynamic and ever changing, you're involved with making those decisions, even involving as small of an area of 4 square feet or 3 square feet all of the time. So an absolute standard of no net impervious surface to me strikes me as really unworkable, and now with all the exemptions, somewhat unnecessary. That said, I don't think we need an absolute cap on the, assuming we don't make a broader change, that I don't think we need an absolute cap in terms of square footage on what would constitute a small amenity.
Other comments? I'll take a turn. So the question I have is, if we have an exemption for small amenities, and whether we have a cap or not, I guess I'm a little bit in favor of it, as Commissioner Markson indicated, but what about, I'll call it a large amenity? Would that fall into the no net impervious? Okay.
Yeah. I think the Commissioner Hay was commenting a moment ago, the example you used about the garbage can. That's happening in real time every day in our park system. When the new playground went in at Mercerdale Park, we've ringed the playground with benches because we have a need for more benches in that location. And it's changes, right? The use patterns in the parks are changing all the time, and we're adapting. So I'm not in favor of trying to prescribe through a zoning code how many small amenities each park will have. I think that's just impractical, and it's going to change next year and the year after. But also know that like every garbage can we have to empty is a cost to the city. So we're not running around putting garbage cans everywhere, right? There's kind of a natural assessment that is happening all the time when we're putting these amenities in. Same with the picnic tables and benches. They have a life cycle, they have to be replaced. That fence, it's got, less than a 20-year life cycle. It's got to be replaced. So a lot of thought is going into putting in just what we need to steward our properties and not overdoing it.
Okay, Commissioner Markson, I'm trying to think, would you be willing to propose a cap, a size cap? And then we could vote on that? I mean, because if we're gonna have a cap, we gotta have a number. What's that?
I said, I don't think we're qualified to do that.
Well,
Like,
I
yeah.
would say that if the pictures above represent the majority of type of small amenities, then I kind of come say, well, at 100 square feet, you probably cover everything. The one thing I think about a little bit is with, what's the definition of small? Well, somebody could say, well, 150 square feet kind of thing. So, that's, and again, it just kind of puts a limit on it, I guess is my thoughts. So. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, is that like, so we would take out the examples and then just put a cap in? Because I feel like the examples are pretty clear as to what is considered like small amenity.
I would say the examples could be left in and then you just say up to a square footage amount. But I think it could work either way.
Well, I think to move the discussion along, I just propose a cap of 100 square feet as kind of defining small amenities that would be exempt.
I do want to mention something or maybe ask a question because
Yeah.
Some of our like bench areas and picnic table areas were identified in our ADA plan as not being compliant, and so, or ADA survey. So in some situations, 100 square feet might not cover it if it's supposed to be ADA.
I think we have ADA exempted already in the
yeah.
impervious surface
Okay,
section.
so if it's covered, then disregard. Thanks.
Okay.
Which is parking. Okay, we might need to broaden it then.
Yeah, I saw the parking, but I wasn't sure
Okay.
about other.
My memory is bad. Sorry, Sam.
All right, so we're probably going to need to make a revision to the proposed exemption for ADA parking to expand that a little bit to other ADA amenities or changes.
It's in the bottom paragraph.
Yeah, I
does
thought it
say
was in there. Oh, there we go.
Then on the bottom, in the following uses, it says exempt.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that. I was just looking at the list below.
Yeah,
Looks like we
yeah.
got it covered.
We do. But
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, can I just
Yeah.
add on a comment? So I want to go back to Commissioner Westberg's comment. The impervious surface, and Commissioner McCarthy asked a question too that was in the matrix. The impervious surface regulation has probably been the single most popular topic surrounding this park zone discussion and even preceding it. During the pros plan, this was a common theme. Driving here tonight, I was asking myself the same question that Commissioner Westberg just asked, is we've added so many exemptions here, we've completely watered it down. What's the point? I think the point is still that we couldn't go put 18 tennis courts in the middle of Luther Burbank Park. This would prevent us from doing that, although there are other things that would also prevent that from happening. I cannot come up with another process or approach in this zoning code to address this. I think we've gotten it to where we can, and we've been trying to honor the spirit of all these discussions that led us here. I think the only other thing you could do is take it out altogether and we could pursue a different policy somewhere else. But my sense, and again, everything leading up to tonight's meeting, the feedback from the community, the pros plan, and your own discussions is that you wanted impervious surface regulations in here, even with this list of exemptions, which are very reasonable and practical. So we tried again to come up with another idea. I didn't come up with it. If any of you have any other thoughts, we still have time.
Commissioner Cohen.
I think we should leave the impervious surface in. Among other things, one of the new appointees to the Planning Commission was a major proponent of no net impervious surface. So eliminating it, I think, is not good governance. I think we can leave these things in. At the moment, I would be in favor of the 100 square foot proposal, unless staff can think of, other than the ADA example, unless staff can think of some typical quote, small amenity that would exceed that. But otherwise, I like something that circumscribes it, even if it's just something that someone reads and doesn't have real effect.
Other comments?
Yeah, I agree
Yep.
with that. I would like to see it stay as part of the park zone. And then just because we're looking at this a second time, having mentioned playgrounds at the last meeting, I remember that conversation was surrounding the playground surfacing around the playground equipment. So I wonder if we can revisit that and make sure that by putting playgrounds, just rather than playground surfacing, surrounding equipment, making sure that we are achieving what we intend to by putting it in there. If we say playgrounds as a whole, that could apply to, a good portion of Dean's Park, for instance, would that allow us to put a large concrete plaza in Dean's Park because it's technically part of the playground? Do we need a limiting factor on that?
So there's kind of two big issues with playgrounds. I think one is already exempted because of ADA. The other one is fall zones. So as we put in bigger pieces of equipment, we need bigger fall zones, and the regulations over fall zones has also evolved. So from the time most of our equipment went in to now, the fall zones are larger. So when we put in the big cone spinner, for example, at Mercerdale Park, you have to have a certain zone surrounding it. That's part of what's driving that surfacing, your comment. Generally, our playgrounds are right sized for the park they're in. So as we're going to replace equipment, we're most often not looking to add more pieces. We're looking to stay within kind of the general number of pieces, but it's, to your point, Commissioner Hay, it's the surfacing that might need to change and evolve. So we would like some flexibility there. At Dean's, just to pick an example, I think in the long run, if my crystal ball were to guide what would happen out there, we may actually go down a piece of equipment. So I think we're a little overprescribed in that playground right now as we think about relaying it out, but the process for that playground will look like a master plan, right? There's a plan being developed, so that would probably cover some of your concerns. I'm just kind of spitballing off the top of my head.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it seemed that we were all supportive of having that playground surfacing around the equipment be exempt from this because, we don't want to lose height in our playground, so we might need to expand fall zone. What I'm trying to distinguish is the difference between that surface surrounding playground equipment and the playground as a whole.
It's probably actually one and the same because we're talking about impervious surface, but if it would be more clear to you, we could write playground surfacing. All of our playground pieces sit on a pad of some sort.
Okay, so like Dean's Children's Playground would be referring to only the area around the playground equipment? Or would it be
all the
the
wood chips,
entire?
that would be kind
Okay,
of.
so that's the playground and Dean's Children is the park.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't call the whole thing a playground. It would just be that
Mhm.
piece where the equipment is attached. Is that right?
That's the way I would
As far as
interpret
that-
it.
Okay,
Don't-
super.
don't
Okay.
give up so quickly.
Non-issue, non-issue then.
Don't give up so quickly, Ashley, because I think your point is a good one, and I don't see definitionally that where the city manager's understanding is real crisp. So I don't know how to.
Look, can
Yeah,
I
Commissioner
add
Westbrook.
a comment? So a third factor is that the way we're doing playgrounds is they're going through an extensive planning and public process, which meets one of the exemption requirements as currently stated in the code. So it's not like the city could go out there and willy-nilly start laying down artificial turf or artificial surfaces or whatever. There's a planning process involving the community, involving staff that results in a product or a plan for improving that playground. So based on that alone, it would be an exemption from
Yeah.
the impervious surface.
Dean's is kind of an unfair example to use because the whole playground is gonna need to be relayed out to address our ADA needs. And so you're right, the process that we will go through is to adopt a plan. I'm not sure I would call it a master plan, but we'll call it a playground plan. It will go to the community, it will come to you, it will go to the council for final approval.
Right.
So to Dawn's point, in the definitions, we do refer to playground as the whole space, not just that piece of playground equipment. So by that definition, we are saying that we can add impervious surface. There are no limits to the entire Dean's Children's Playground, which is to use it as an example. So, I mean, I think I would propose that we put a qualifier on this, that we're talking about playground surfacing surrounding playground equipment. I guess I'd feel more comfortable with that, because we are also allowing for picnic shelters. We're also allowing for restrooms. I think we're going to be able to achieve functionally what we want to do in a playground without increasing the impervious surface. So if there's interest in that, I would suggest that amendment.
Okay, I mean, so right now in the definition, we say recreational facility provided as a play area. So I guess it's really then it gets to the, well, what do we mean by play area? And I guess, do we need just the equipment itself or kind of that surrounding fall area, et cetera, et cetera? That's, because I mean, I think if the play area definition included kind of surrounding area, you'd be fine, right?
Yeah, I think the definition is too vague for me
Okay,
to
okay.
read it.
All right.
But I would rather put a qualifier on the playground portion than on the playground definition. Just to make sure that this exemption is achieving what we want to do, which, and maybe we should talk about that. Do we want to only exempt that area around the equipment? Or do we want to say that we can have as much impervious surface in the playground as, no limits on playgrounds in general, like the whole playground? We could see kind of where people are on that.
Elaine?
I was just gonna chime in and say, it may make sense to do it as just the surfacing around it, because remember that what goes outside of that surfacing a lot of times is actually our ADA accommodations for access to those pieces of equipment. So that hard surfacing also has its own, if it's really just functionally for access. So I think put together those things encompass everything that you're looking for there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What, Peter?
Commissioner Cohen?
Ashley, could you restate the language you were thinking of in G1D, that you would change playgrounds to something like what?
Yeah, I would suggest that it would read playground surfacing surrounding playground equipment. And of course, the trails leading to it, that's ADA, so that's fine, that's exempt. So this is, so we would just be talking about what we talked about in the previous meeting, which was, we might need to switch over some of those surfaces. And I believe that amendment would include the fall zone and, it's the area surrounding the equipment.
I guess I'm not necessarily against the suggestion, but I guess I go back to the definition and I'm struggling a little to see how the additional wording changes anything. Because the definition says provided as a play area for children, and we talked about that being that fall area and so forth. Surrounding
And,
playground
maybe,
equipment.
maybe it's not needed because there will be master plans, but if perhaps a cement plaza were proposed for the area around a picnic shelter, we want a big cement area where kids can ride their bikes or whatever. you could do that. You could put a big, huge cement plaza in a playground area, a park, outdoor play area. Um, unless we put some limits on it and, if people like that design, then it would be okay, given our current code.
Well, you actually couldn't do that because to put in a big cement area around a play area either would require that to be approved in a master plan or some other planning document by the council, or it would be subject to the no net increase in impervious surface that we're putting into the code. So that, assuming that was proposed and approved and it went to the planning commission, you would have to identify an offsetting amount of impervious surface that was being removed somewhere.
Yeah, so maybe we are having trouble with the definition, then maybe that's what we need to change, because I think of the entire Dean's Children's Playground. People call it Dragon Park. I think of that whole area as a playground. I think it would it fit into the definition here? Outdoor facility provided as a play area. That could refer to the whole area, right?
Well, I
So
think the
maybe
key
a
there
playground is just
facility.
equipment.
Right.
I think the key there is facility.
Okay, maybe structure, outdoor recreational structure provided as a play area for children. I would feel more comfortable with that. And then our exemption applies to that specifically, which we were intending it to.
Can I,
Oh, Commissioner.
just for make sure I'm following what you're saying. In your example, I think what you're concerned about is that they would build a plaza and call it a playground, right? Because kids are gonna be riding their bikes on it. Is that what your example is?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's one example, but my concern is mainly that our parks would become paved more than we want them to be. And if the entire area is considered a playground, then it allows for that.
Right,
So, yeah.
okay.
Peter,
Commissioner Cohen.
I liked your first idea better because playground is defined as it is on page 5. But then where it becomes operative is under G1D. And so you're saying playground, what surfaces around equipment or something like that. To me, that did it okay. Because the definition is just of the word playground. And so I mean, I suppose you could do it either way, either in the definition or in in the impervious surface language. I kind of liked your other idea better.
Well, what's our, what's the commission's pleasure here? I mean, Ashley, what, do you want to just suggest your wording under G1D, the playground, saying surface surrounding playground equipment?
Or structure.
Sure, yeah, yeah, I would suggest playground surfacing surrounding
Playground equipment
playground
and/or structures.
equipment. Yeah, right, however that functionally could be worded. Playground surfacing surrounding playground equipment.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, if not, let's, Commissioner Markson.
Well, I can't remember what your suggestion was that Don liked.
That was the
That's
one.
what-
Oh, that was it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay, so the suggestion is to modify under G1D playgrounds to add surface surrounding playground equipment.
Or yeah, play equipment.
Play
Does
equipment
that
or
sound right?
structures.
Play equipment.
Okay, play equipment, all right. All those in favor, thumbs up. Okay. Did you get all that, Carson?
What was the last recommendation you had? So I had surfacing surrounding playground equipment.
Around play equipment, I believe, not playground. Just
Play equipment and structures, however that sounds best.
So word playground still in there
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning?
Yeah, at the beginning,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. All right, okay. So now we go back to small amenities. And my recommendation, I guess we'll just go thumbs up on it, is defining small amenities as being 100 square feet or less. Those in favor? Oh,
Are you eliminating the examples or just adding the 100 in?
I'm just adding the 100 in. 1, 2, okay, all right. That's a pass.
And then emergency construction or maintenance is remaining.
Do you have any comments on that, or we just, it is what it is?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay,
It's just
I
a-
agree, I agree, okay.
So I actually have a question on that one. Are we talking about temporary emergency construction or maintenance? Or could you give us an example of what that would look like? Because now I'm looking at this thinking construction sounds like a permanent fixture to me. So what would be an example of emergency construction?
Well, I guess the one recent example I can think of is what we had to do at at Luther Burbank when we moved the police parking down there. And I guess things like that, but that's all that comes to mind.
So I can make up a scenario potentially. We have a number of steep slopes in some of our parks. If we had a slide that was threatening to the park or threatened health and safety, we'd have to go in and do emergency shoring. That type of work, we would be responsive, we would get in, we would do the shoring, and it might stay in place for a while we figured out a permanent fix. I think the word construction could possibly come out. Could be a little more vague, emergency repairs, emergency maintenance. I will say, I don't know if Allison's on this call tonight. There she is. As a city, we're often responding to emergencies and we have some ways to do that without getting a permit if there's life safety issues. Allison, did you want to comment on that? Is this exemption even really necessary? Do you have a thought?
I mean, my thought was very much along the lines of the example you gave. There's definitely been situations on private property where landslides have occurred and emergency shoring or stabilization needs to be put in. That does stay in place often for a period of months or years while the property owner goes through permitting of a long-term solution. The permitting process can be extensive in critical areas and engineering, a retaining wall or something like that can take a while to get done. Other things could happen like trees coming down or shoreline erosion or, any number of things that could require some kind of safety improvement that would be composed of impervious surfaces, whether that's a rockery or a retaining wall or what have you.
I think another example could be emergency utility work that needs to happen within park boundaries also. Water, sewer lines.
Yeah, emergency, you're reacting. It's not like we're planning this. We're reacting to a situation that normally we wouldn't even think about. So I'm personally uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with all of those examples that you described. Super comfortable with all of those, but I'm also looking at this from the perspective that by this code, we could say there was emergency situation, we don't have a city hall. So we can use Luther Burbank admin building or one of these other buildings that are exempt from size to build, to construct. It's an emergency. We need to construct a building of unlimited size.
The construction of a building is not allowable without a permit. It's not an emergency. That's not a viable scenario. I understand where you're
Okay.
going with this. I just want to reassure you, I couldn't emergency build a city hall.
But the code would allow for a permit to be given to do that, right?
No,
Okay.
this is like, we have to go in and it's a true emergency. No.
Got it.
And,
Okay.
and I think
So-
you, in that scenario, and I know buildings are very sensitive. I think we trip over multiple sections of this code, the buildings section. Namely,
Yeah, exactly. And we're not there yet for the building part. So maybe we'll just kind of table that till we get there. So
I
yeah,
think-
I'm comfortable with those
I think the word
examples.
we could, I'm fine if, so one, I'm fine if we take this out altogether because I believe we have the tools as a city to deal with emergencies regardless of what the park zone says. So if you just want to take it out, we could live with that. If you want to keep it in, just for transparency, we could take out the word construction. It'd be like emergency repairs or maintenance. That might be more
Yeah.
reflective of the type of emergencies we're actually responding to.
I like that.
Okay, so want to have the recommendation, emergency maintenance or repairs. Okay, if everybody comfortable with that? All right.
Peter, can I chime in for a minute?
Yes, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, sorry, this is several minutes back, but I had trouble getting off mute while I was driving. I apologize. I'm not going to take a stand in this meeting and try to convince you guys on impervious surface one way or the other, but I am worried a little bit about ambiguity. And the last amendment that you had about areas surrounding play equipment, I see two major areas of ambiguity that I believe you should consider. One is surrounding. I don't know what that means. That could be acres of land, as long as it's around it. And secondly is, I don't know what play equipment is. And one could argue that a tennis court is play equipment. Certainly a tennis net is play equipment, and the whole court might be. So I'd encourage you to maybe think a little bit more on that one and see if you can sharpen the definitions.
We have been taking notes and Carson is gonna go back and watch that whole discussion. I'm not sure
Yeah.
we're trying to wordsmith all of that tonight.
I
Makes a lot
agree.
of sense. So
But
let
here-
us take a stab between now and the next meeting.
Here's at least to consider in light of those comments, could say immediately surrounding or some word like that, immediately surrounding. And the other, what was the second one that Councilman?
Play equipment.
Equipment or the
Yeah, and maybe it's better to have it as playground equipment rather than play equipment for the reason that Councilmember Reynolds said. So, because you wouldn't as easily think of a tennis court as playground equipment. So that might be the way to go.
That might be a little bit better. I agree. And I'm happy to have staff take a look at refining. And if you guys are comfortable with that, I just wanted to make sure they had it on their list.
Right? Just
Oh, yeah. Vice Chair.
I would suggest saying something like required surfacing for installed playground equipment.
Did you get that?
Required surfacing for installed playground equipment.
What's the required part?
Based on the construction plan for what needs to be installed for fall zone in support of that equipment.
So the staff want to kind of take that suggestion and kind of vet it a little bit and bring it back.
We'll bring that back at the
Yeah,
next
okay.
meeting with
Yeah.
a
All right.
proposal.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think it's a good one. Okay, so I think we covered the items on this slide.
I think so. So the next topic is lighting. At the previous PRC meeting, there was a question that was raised about the lighting standards specific to general outdoor lighting. Just as a quick refresher on that section, that standard is put into place to minimize glare, sky glow, light trespass. Those are all defined terms in the park zone. Onto neighboring properties, and it also includes shielding and installation requirements, and as well as a few exemptions for specific types of lighting. On this next slide, this is the proposed exemption that we removed as a result of one of the questions that were raised. This particular exemption was lighting within a public right-of-way or easement for the purpose of illuminating roads, trails, or pedestrian ways. This was removed because there aren't any right-of-way areas in the park zone, and those areas are actually regulated elsewhere in the code. So we didn't feel that this was necessary. This was the only question that was raised on the lighting section. So we're looking for a thumbs up or thumbs down with this change.
Okay, so the change is to remove it.
Correct.
Everybody in, okay.
All right.
Yep, moving on.
All right, so before we get into the proposal for building size standards, we want to just take some time to go through some examples of existing buildings in the park system. So we have a number of photos throughout the park system that Sam is going to help me go through and just give an overview of what buildings there are and the uses of those buildings. So we're starting off with Luther Burbank Park.
Yeah, Sam Hart, Parks Operations Manager, can continue a little tour in the park. So at the top left, we've got the Luther Admin Building that staffs a number of different teams from Youth and Family Services. Parks and Rec have traditionally had offices in there. We've had PD in there at different times. Currently, IT is housed in there, as well as just other folks that need some office space while we have our facilities issues. And then going to top middle, we've got the Luther Burbank Restroom Building that's right across from the playground next to the pickleball courts. And that's kind of an interesting building. It's got the little patio up top, and also has like a utility closet in the middle where pipe access and supplies can be stored. And then top right, we've got the Luther Burbank Caretakers Building. This is a pretty useful facility for us at Luther Burbank. It's basically a house layout, and in the downstairs, it's kind of a garage area with covered storage, and we store mowers in there and different, line trimmers, chainsaws, fuel, paint, supplies, things like that. And then upstairs, it's sometimes just used as storage. We have some Mercer Island Historical Society. They have a lot of items stored up there, as well as emergency management, and also some offices and kitchen break room area as well. So it's really useful for such a large property. We have folks that can, get out of the weather, take lunch, and as well as keep their equipment secured. And then going down towards the lake, in the bottom left, we've got the boiler building. So this is pretty much completed as far as phase one of the seismic retrofits. The chimney stack there has been secured. I think on our tour, we did go through there, but I'm not sure if the staircase was completed. But in the big building, the big, warehouse kind of style portion of the building, they've done a really good job. It's got, a second level, basically, a lot of new concrete, very simple but stylish looking. There's stairs and some wire railings and things. So it's still kind of sitting empty right now. There's more to do on that facility with the sewer and just some different things getting hooked up. But the bathrooms were also renovated, as well as the concession stand. So At the very least, in recent years, it's served as having, bathroom access for folks, and then also storage for summer camps, people, programming, boating events or boating camps and things like that. So it has a lot of potential for how it's programmed in the future. We've got the lot of storage and potential office space for camps or concessionaires, things like that. And then bottom middle, we've got I believe that's the old guard shack that's near the swim beach. And right now, it's just kind of used as like a storage facility. We keep random things for the swim beach there, rope and buoys and things like that. Summer camps could potentially have storage there if they needed it. And it could also serve the purpose as like a, recreation facility, essentially, like if it was needed in the future. And then bottom right, we've got the restroom buildings there at the restroom building at the swim beach. And I'm happy to report that it does look a lot better. It's been pressure washed recently. It's almost as if it received a new paint job. It's really brightened it up. There's an outdoor shower there just out of the frame as well. So I think that kind of hits Luther Burbank, if you want to move on.
Can I ask you a question? What, can you put those pictures back up? This is for later on the 3,500 square foot maximum on multi-purpose facilities. For example, the caretaker's house, what's the square footage, your estimate of that? And what's the square footage of the boiler building? Ballpark.
Do we have that in the table? The caretakers, so the caretakers, I believe the interior square footage might be closer to 1,800, but overall, let's see, yep, a couple more.
Well, that's okay. I don't want to take a lot, but it's not 3,500.
No.
No, it's less. So the 3,500, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
It's referencing specific facility.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the context of it compared to other things. Or what's the size of the admin building? Footprint.
Yeah, I think most of that's in the table, so we can get to that. So
Okay.
next, Clark Beach Park. This is Clark and Groveland have pretty similar bathroom facility layouts. They're similar design. They're almost identical, really. And basically, you've got restrooms as well as some storage. And then what's common is just kind of that, we call it like a pipe chase or a utility closet, where a lot of, the toilet fixtures and pipes and things can be accessed for repairs. And then Groveland as well, pretty similar. Pretty simple, but well used. And then got the swim beach there. Homestead, this is a restroom facility with the green door right there is the utility closet. And then in the back of this building, you can't really see it, but behind the bushes there on the right frame to the left of the building, there's a pretty big storage closet. And so one common theme with a lot of our facilities is they are, also they're restroom facilities, but we also store a lot of materials and equipment there. So this one, seasonally, there might be things like grass seed or fertilizer or some athletic equipment. We've got the baseball fields there. So, or, hoses for pressure washing or pressure washers, stuff like that. This is a relatively small one, but pretty common for us to have, equipment just so that we don't have to haul stuff all over the place. It's just ready to go. Supplies, toilet paper, things like that, cleaning supplies. And then getting into Island Crest Park. So the building on the left is, I guess you can call it multi-use building. It's got large restrooms, which sort of at times might serve as locker rooms, changing rooms for the athletic rentals there. We've got a concession stand, which is used by teams. And then on the west side of the building, again, we've got the kind of a big storage closet area where we can store utility vehicles. Like we have these kind of like a small golf cart type thing. And we use these to access the fields and maintain them. So at this facility, we have both grass and artificial turf. We've got dirt infields, we've got artificial infields. So that requires a lot of different equipment. We have with those lighter weight utility vehicles, we get out on the artificial turf. We have different implements that we drag to sort of fluff up and keep the the fibers of the fake grass upright. And then we have implements to clean it off. We will apply more infill as it gets worn out, rubber and cork and things like that. And so we store all that at the facilities. We have, huge bins and buckets of different materials, and then, paint for painting the fields, chalk, grass, seed, fertilizer, drying agent for this time of year when we're trying to work that dirt infield when we're fighting the rain. Yeah, and then top right, we've got the Dean's Children's Park restroom. That's kind of one of our smaller, that's a single stall restroom there. And it's pretty simple, but it kind of falls in sort of what like the bare minimum might be in a park facility with just needing one restroom. And then bottom right, kind of some more recreational facilities. We've got the batting cages and then a storage building that's used by different teams and clubs. High school baseball store stuff there, Boys and Girls Club, different things like that, just depending on the time of year. So in addition to everything we have, a lot of these teams will have a lot of equipment they will access and store on site as well. Football pads, pitching machines, L screens for batting practice, and a lot of things like that. So it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes to be able to accommodate everything in a small area. So it's helpful to have secure areas and storage for us to keep our equipment secure and have everything we need to maintain the facility, as well as our user groups. And then coming over to the Mercerdale Bicentennial area, this is our restrooms there. And this is also sort of connected to the old recycling center building. It's sort of a miscellaneous storage facility. We've had YFS has used it to store thrift shop materials and inventory in kind of the back warehouse area. This is a pretty old and challenging facility as far as like succumbing to the elements and things like that. The farmer's market also accesses this building and has some storage, as well as they have like some plumbing and the sink in the back, and it gets heavily used during the farmer's market season, as well as obviously, special events, music in the park and summer celebration and things like that. It's kind of a real focal point. But it also is limited for how many people come in that area. And then getting over into Dean's Children's Park, kind of you'll notice the nice green roof on the Hobbit House there. That's formerly a restroom at one point. The utilities, the lines to that little building have been capped off. So essentially we utilize it as a storage building just for like the bike skills area and just keeping tools, materials there essentially. And then the picnic shelter there right next to it. And then Rotary Park, I haven't actually been in this building, but I believe this is the emergency well building. And you see the tanks right behind it. Rotary Park is essentially a utility site with kind of a passive use park that's also available and some trails around it and things like that. Definitely a crucial piece of infrastructure for our island.
All right, thank you, Sam. That concludes our photo tour. So we'll go ahead and move on to the proposed building standards. I have a few slides here that I can just give a quick overview of the new proposed building standards, and then I think I'll stop screen sharing the presentation and hop over to the draft code to just take you through the specific language that's in the code and attempt to explain the differences between the new version and the version that was originally included in your packet. So building size standards are newly proposed to address all existing buildings in the park with a few exceptions, and then new buildings as well. The difference there was that in the original version, we had proposed standards specifically for new buildings and then just put a blanket exemption on existing buildings. And so with the specific exemptions that we're proposing, we're able to kind of dig deeper and make specific exemptions as opposed to just a blanket exemption across all existing buildings. So the sizes for various buildings in the park system, we're proposing a maximum of 500 square feet of gross floor area for restrooms, park maintenance facilities, and recreational facilities. The restrooms there's a new definition in the code for restroom. Essentially, it's a small facility that is proposed to provide sort of the bare amenities for what is commonly found in a public restroom. I believe it was Commissioner Cohen who had a question about whether showers are included in this. In this draft, we haven't specified quite to that point, so we can talk about what amenities are included in a restroom, but I think the intention here is toilet, a sink, perhaps some paper towel dispensers, soap dispensers, just really sort of bare minimum amenities. Park maintenance facilities, and a good example of that is the shed that Sam had just talked about at Island Crest Park over here in the middle photo. These include storage areas, areas where the equipment is stored. Sam, any other uses for maintenance facilities other than storage and things along that line?
Maybe some like workshop type stuff. Also, utilities. So like the access to light, electrical panels and things like that. Irrigation controllers, pretty much.
Moving on to recreation facilities, the building section is only proposed to regulate buildings. So this means that all recreational facilities such as an athletic field or a sport court, it's not going to be addressed in the buildings section. This is specifically talking about recreation facilities that are buildings. We don't necessarily have very many of them in the park system. Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish and then I'll ask my question.
So a good example of this is the announcer stand at Island Crest Park. We don't have a photo up here on this slide, but that's a good example of a small recreational facility. And then a dugout for a baseball or softball field is another example. Those are both well under, not well under, but under 500 square feet. And so we feel that proposed regulation is good to encompass all existing specific recreational facilities that are buildings.
Now my question. So what are you calling the batting cage? Because it is a building, it's got a roof, it's got sides, and it's used for recreation purposes.
Perfect timing. Multi-purpose facility.
Oh, it's multi-purpose.
Is what this, under the current definitions, the batting cages fall under a multi-purpose facility.
Oh, okay.
So my understanding is that it's a sort of a support facility for the athletic fields. You go in there to practice batting. I believe it's also used as a storage facility. Perhaps Ryan could provide some more details on the uses of the batting cage.
Yeah, absolutely. We call it a batting cage. It does a lot of different things for us. And Carson mentioned the storage aspect. Oftentimes in our off seasons, we're storing equipment in maybe one of the bays of the batting cage. It has two, as well as sort of an open area that we may store off season park maintenance equipment and things like that when those fields are maybe less heavily used. But it also, as Sam mentioned, there there's a lot of equipment, specifically at Island Crest Park, that these different teams, specifically the high school, has on site. So a lot of times they're storing their equipment in there as well.
So that's considered a multi-purpose facility. The batting cage is approximately 2,450 square feet of gross floor area. So that falls within the proposed limit of 3,500 square feet. That is the staff recommendation. 3,500 square feet. We came up with this figure based on the Island Crest Park building that has restrooms, concession, storage. That's this bottom right-hand photo that Sam covered earlier. That building's just under 3,500 square feet. Now that we are proposing that these regulations cover all existing buildings, we may want to bump that up just a tiny bit to give some wiggle room for that facility in case you know, a small footprint increase is necessary to meet ADA standards, for example, or other storage needs. And the last piece on this, picnic shelters, we covered that at the last meeting. So I believe we already got a thumbs up from the PRC on a limit of 1,200 square feet or in gross floor area and 16 feet in height. So these are the standards that we're proposing for all buildings with a few exceptions. And so those exceptions include Luther Burbank Administrative
Carson?
Building. Yes.
Can we go back to the previous slide in case there's any questions before we jump? And I think.
Yeah,
the
I have a
vice chair.
question. So in the multi-purpose facilities, at Island Crest Park specifically includes a restroom. So within that multi-purpose facility, is the restroom restricted to 500 square feet, or is that open? Where a multi-purpose facility could have, I guess, bring up showers or other amenities could be much larger within, as long as it conforms to 3,500 square feet.
That's correct. So
Okay.
the restroom portion of a multi-purpose facility could be over 500 square feet.
Okay.
And maybe along the same lines, going to restrooms specifically. So once several of the pictures showed like at Homestead, you know, there's a restroom, but then there's a small storage area, right? So are we calling that a restroom or is that a multi-purpose?
Multi-purpose.
Okay.
Can
Commissioner
you
Head.
remind me approximately the square footage of the current picnic shelters that we have in Dean's Park, and then there's some smaller ones in Aubrey Davis?
The Aubrey Davis Park shelter is proposed as the new standard for the park system. I believe we've covered the Dean's Children's Park shelter at a previous meeting, but it's pretty old and in need of
Full replacement.
full replacement. So the proposal will be to replace that shelter with the one at Aubrey Davis Park. That the picnic shelter regulations that you see up on screen here are based off the Aubrey Davis Park model.
Thanks.
Commissioner Cohen.
Maybe you wanted to wait to get into this, but I would like to talk about height restrictions and the 3,500 number. So we have a height restriction on picnic shelters, but we don't have it on anything else. What's the reason for that?
Not necessarily a reason in particular, but we wanted to provide these regulations as sort of a starting point for discussion with the PRC.
Yeah.
So if height restrictions are of interest to the commission, we can discuss that.
I will also say that one of the differences with the picnic shelters is that we have a standard picnic shelter now. That is the Aubrey Davis Park picnic shelter. So as we replicate picnic shelters in our system, which will likely be a slow process, they will all be standardized. The restroom buildings are all over the map. We don't have a standard for restroom buildings, and there may be some challenges in trying to get there. That was one reason.
Okay, so on the height issue, at the moment, I would be in favor of including some height limitations, whether it's the same 16 feet or something lower or higher, I'm not quite sure of. On the 3,500 square feet, what's the next largest multi-purpose square footage in the city that staff can think of, downsized from the one at Island Crest Park?
Well, it's, I mean, if you're thinking outside of what would be in the park zone, South Mercer Playfields is similar. So for an athletic facility, Homestead is, has that pretty large storage area workshop in the back. So those kind of come to mind. The shop area, again, out of the park zone, but just as an example, the shop area at Aubrey Davis Park has a big yard, as well as it's fairly, in addition to the restrooms, it's almost double as far as like workshop space and everything. And then everything we talked about at Luther, caretakers and whatnot.
So maybe what I was getting at doesn't work, because I was thinking that if the Island Crest Park multi-use facility is sort of the unique example of something that's in the 3,500, then I was thinking maybe there's some way to carve that out and put a much lower limit on other buildings. But from what you say, maybe you can't do it because there's at least a half a dozen that are at least a couple thousand square feet, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think another thing just to understand about like a lot of our facilities is we, as far as we don't have a lot of things covered up. We have like fenced in areas and we have things outside, which would be nice if they were inside just for safety reasons and also just to keep them out of the weather maintenance and wear and tear and whatnot. So the 3,500 number for that example, for that facility, it serves a lot of patron usage as well as our needs for maintaining the facility as well.
And sort of in response to that, I mean, 3,500 square feet strikes me as a big structure, big, however defined. I mean, I don't know, how big's this room? This room is what, probably 40 by 30 maybe, or something like that. So it's 1,200. I don't know. I could be way wrong, but I don't know. 3,500. I don't want a lot of 3,500 footprint buildings around unless they're ones that are already there, That's
So,
sort of the way I feel.
I guess I do want to just provide some color commentary. Restroom buildings are changing. The traditional men's and women's facilities are evolving, some cases by law, some cases just as a best practice. A good example is over at Bellevue Downtown Park. They have family restrooms now. That's not something, we don't have the resources right now to upgrade or replace our restroom buildings. I hope at some point in the next decade or so, the city can start working on that. All of our restroom buildings are outdated. So I want to encourage you to leave some wiggle room in for multi-purpose facilities. The other thing is that the way our park system evolved is we just kept dropping in buildings. They weren't consolidated. And, modern park design wants everything consolidated in one. So we want the restroom building, the concession building, and the maintenance lockers all in one facility. We don't want to be stewarding 4 different buildings in a park. So I understand the concern about the overall size, but my dream would be one building in a park and everything consolidated and getting rid of all of these old structures. That's probably what it's going to look like at Dean's, right? We have all this equipment in these old buildings. They'll probably all come down and be consolidated. So just some things to think about in the future to make sure our regulations align with how we might need to evolve and as we replace some of these structures.
In addition, just keep in mind about the impervious surface standard that would apply to new buildings as well.
Well, Carson, I mean, do you have any other slides? I want to make sure we're kind of jumping around here a little bit. Are there any other slides that you want to talk about before we kind of?
There's, well, we have the standards here and then a few proposed exemptions. I can cover those and then
Okay.
answer questions about that. So the list here is pretty simple. It's the 3 Luther Burbank buildings that we've been dealing with the past several meetings or thinking about in the back of our heads. The administrative building, the boiler building, and the caretaker's house. We're proposing that the regulations for building size that we just covered in the previous slide do not apply to these buildings. In addition, the emergency well building at Rotary Park, that's an example of a well building that we believe should be exempt because it's part of a utility facility. We had a meeting prior to this to try to think of other types of utility facilities that require a building, and this was the only example we could think of that is currently in the park system. So we thought we would specify emergency well buildings as opposed to utility buildings.
And then maybe if you could go to the next slide that had the kind of all the square footage and so forth. Commissioner McCarthy, what?
Thanks. Yeah, I just was noticing that Clark, Homestead, and Groveland, all of their restrooms are way over the 500. So would those be considered multi-use?
Yeah, that's correct. This building name column isn't necessarily updated with the types of facilities, but that's correct. It would be multi-purpose.
I think for the next meeting, we'll do that, though. We'll make sure we put the appropriate definition label on each of these buildings.
Okay, so before we get off of this existing, anybody have any questions about any of these? Commissioner Hay?
Yeah, I guess I do, just because of what looks like a new addition in C4, where we say that, I think that's a new addition, that a permitted use would be government services in the Luther Burbank Administrative Building. That's a new addition, correct?
Correct.
Whereas before we just said the buildings are allowed. Now it says government services are allowed in buildings that have no building restrictions, correct? Is that
That's-
where we're at with the
That's
code?
correct.
Okay.
I can bring up the code and run through the proposed new language just to give an overview before we enter into this discussion, if that would be helpful. But
Yeah, I guess that's the only reason why I have a question about exempting these buildings from the building size. While at the same time saying we're allowing government, I mean, do we want City Hall in the park? That would be
Well,
a potential,
Yeah, so let's,
are we
I
happy?
want to, let's just stay on this. If anybody has any kind of factual questions about, for example, the dugout at Island Crest Park, which one would that fall under? It's obviously not, it's just under recreation, right? Facility? Is that what I wrote down? Under 500 square feet?
can you repeat the name of the facility?
The dugout at Island Crest Park, the baseball dugout?
Recreational
Yeah,
facility.
okay.
I don't think we have that in our table. Oh, yeah, we do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, so if there's no other questions, kind of factual questions on this, then let's go back to the 2 slides back to building standards, and then we'll go to the exemption issue, okay? We've already had a couple of questions. One question I had is that, like, for example, on restrooms where we can add a small storage room and then all of a sudden it jumps from 500 to 3,500. And I take the city manager's thought that, having just one building in a park makes a lot of sense as she indicated, for a variety of reasons. But I'm wondering, was there any thought given to saying, based on the size of the park, so we probably have a handful of parks that we'd say, yeah, 3,500 square feet, one building would make sense, but there's probably a lot of much smaller parks that we'd say that doesn't really even make sense.
It's
And-
it's a little more nuanced than that, unfortunately. It really has to do with the intensity of use of the park facility. For example, Groveland, the footprint of the beach is actually considerably small, but it's one of the higher intensity uses in our park system. And we've got equipment that we put out in the lake and we put out on the beach that gets stored in that building. I don't really feel comfortable about tying it to park acreage. And we couldn't come up with a way to easily tie it to park uses without probably spending 6 more months on this thing. So that's what we're struggling with.
Okay.
You know, to contrast, you've got Mercerdale Park is a chameleon. Like this afternoon, it was probably being lightly used, and then we put 1,000 people in it for a summer concert. You know, so it's just, that's part of the challenge we're dealing with, is size is not often the only determining factor on like the scale of the restroom building, for example, or the maintenance needs.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this, on the restrooms, so would it be contemplated that pretty much every restroom will have storage, so it will be considered multi-purpose in the future? And I guess if
Case
the
by
answer to that is
case,
yes,
yeah.
then you wonder whether, I guess you would need it for existing structures, but
Again, tough question to answer. It really depends on the park facility. One of the places we most need a restroom building is over in Aubrey Davis Park on the west side, where we've got an athletic field and playgrounds, and we have honey buckets.
Mhm.
That was kind of one of the top of the list facility needs when we did the pros plan. If we put a restroom building in, we might ask ourselves, what is the equipment that our maintenance teams are hauling back and forth to these facilities every day? There's an athletic field there, so possibly something that needs to be stored. But beyond that part of the Aubrey Davis Park functions a little more passively. Now, Aubrey Davis Park was not the best example because it's not in the park zone, but just thinking about how we start to add restroom buildings. Mercerdale needs a new restroom building. At some point, the existing facility is at the end of its useful life. So we have a question to ask ourselves. Where should the restroom building be? Across the park from the playground or next to the playground? And then, so it might be, you can see where I'm going, like every park has to be evaluated. We have to talk to the community, get feedback from all of you.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we just go through each one of these and we can have we already had a few comments, so basically standalone restroom only, not exceeding 500 square feet. I think based on the list, the few of them that are there, that fits in, and as was indicated, the future may be different, but anybody have any additional comments or comfortable with that? All right, good. So now park maintenance facilities, again, 500 square, not exceeding 500 square feet. Any? All right, we're good with that. Same thing with recreational facilities, dugouts, et cetera. Good, all right. All right, multi-purpose facilities shall not exceed 3,500 square feet in gross floor area. Good.
I'm still mixed on that. If you had restroom, maintenance facilities and batting cages, you'd have 1,500 square feet if you looked at them individually on the top 3 bullets. But you can do 3,500 square feet under this, but I guess I don't feel so strongly about it that it's worth talking about a lot more.
You'd need more than 500 square feet for a batting cage. You'd need 3 times that. So.
Okay.
As these buildings start to get bigger, the other thing that we start to run into is we need a mechanical chase especially with concession stands and hot water. And so that's where you start to see this, the size jump up a little bit. We start to see other types of needs. Now, I want to emphasize these buildings that we're talking about are very expensive. And as we go to start replacing, we're not going to be pushing for the biggest and best. We're going to, the city's resources are pretty thin right now. That will drive things the other direction, smaller.
Okay, so the recommendation is not to exceed 3,500 square feet, everybody. All right. And last is picnic shelters, but I guess we already talked about that, so we're good on that. All right. So if we go to the next slide on the exemptions.
Do you want to come back to height?
Oh, excuse me. Okay,
I mean,
let's
Yeah,
talk
I mean,
about
I
it
guess
now.
I still don't understand why, I heard some of the answers, why you have 16 feet for picnic shelters, but no height, sort of bulk limitation via height on any of the other buildings.
Well, you can look at these pictures and I can tell you just by eyeballing them, we probably have a batting cage taller than 16 feet. We can add in height. We can do an analysis and add in height if you feel strongly about it. Some of these buildings, if we're replacing them, they'll be subject to building code and other things.
But if you had a second or third story on a new building, that would, if you have a second or third story, that doesn't impact impervious surface, right? Because that's just square footage on the ground. It doesn't impact gross floor area. That's just on the ground. So
No, a second floor.
second floor gets added in.
Yeah, there's a difference between the building footprint, whereas gross floor area would be like the total floor area of the building itself. So the second story would add more gross floor area.
Okay, well, that gives me a little more comfort. Thank you.
If you feel strongly about us adding heights, we can talk between now and your April meeting and get those in there. I just want to be candid that we have some tall structures and I don't want you to be surprised when you see the height of the batting cage.
Well, let's take the temperature of the group. Do you want the staff to evaluate height and with the potential objective of putting a height restriction?
A gross number, that represents the tallest of
Right.
the current inventory.
Oh, just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So just to provide a little bit of,
Or if you wanted to allow for a second story.
We don't want to allow for second story
I don't think
buildings.
so.
No,
I think we wanted to go.
no.
So just keep it within what's currently within the inventory, the building inventory.
All right.
What you said, I couldn't hear what you said, Brian.
I said, just come up with a number that keeps it within the current building inventory, so that the existing structures
So
are.
just like we're doing on size
Yeah,
and
yeah,
multi-purpose.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, okay with that? Okay. Thank you, Roy. That's
okay,
quick.
so we'll come back to the next meeting with a proposal for height limitations. Just a little bit more context here, the Island Crest building, believe that's approximately 17 feet tall. We also covered a restroom building or a multi-purpose facility at Homestead Park, this building. This is approximately 18 feet tall. So that's sort of the
Okay,
range that
all
we're
right,
looking
so-
at.
Yeah, so whatever it takes to accommodate.
Yeah.
them, to keep them within compliant.
Okay,
So you're not gonna hit any pop-ups?
All right.
Only line drives.
okay, so we finished up with this slide and now we're talking about exemptions. So were there any more comments on this before moving on?
Any,
Yeah, I mean, well.
Commissioner Haynes?
Oh, go ahead.
Go.
Go ahead. Well, yeah, and that was my question earlier is if we want this in here with the addition of the use of government services. So I see these two as being connected. The newly added use as well as this new exemption of these buildings. So this is a lot that was just kind of, we just heard about this today, right? So,
These exemptions were are always proposed. We just restructured to clarify that not all of the buildings were exempt. It's just, we further limited it, and I'll have Carson. Oh, there's Kim. Hi, Kim. With her hand up.
Yeah, I actually had wanted to add in the government services to actually clarify for these three buildings. It's not just the empty buildings that you're exempting, but I think the idea, the intent was that the current uses of those buildings would be an allowed use. And I thought that government services would encompass what those buildings are used for. That may, I may be wrong and you might want to narrow that down some. But I do think you want to include in there what those uses are, that you're comfortable with them continuing. But I'm assuming you wouldn't want something else completely different to be made of those buildings and be exempted.
If I could just jump in here, I think that was one of the questions I had was in looking at those buildings of kind of exactly to Kim's point of making sure that the use was going to be for essentially government services and they weren't going to be renting it out to private entities and things like that, that it would just, it was a very limited scope and what the future holds, who knows, but it was just going to be for that. So I'm, I guess, in favor of the.
Yeah, the
that
limitation,
suggestion.
I do, Kim, I know we were kind of working on this a little bit this afternoon. I had a quick sidebar with Carson before the meeting started. I think we want to make sure that there's an existing definition of government services in our code that's broad and includes all government entities, I think, state, county. My recommendation is to limit the use to city or municipal government services specific to Mercer Island. So we narrow that scope.
Okay.
But it needs to be, Commission, I'm going to be frank with you. The long-term facility plan of the city is that the Luther Burbank Admin Building will continue to provide a variety of, and house a variety of staff. We've lost our city hall. There's just no way around that. So right now we have YFS and other teams in there. The kind of grand plan is that deck is going to shuffle again, but there will be a variety of other city government teams in there. So we're going to need flexibility in that language to allow for those uses. To the point about leasing facilities, I want to be careful about this. The zoning code is not a place to restrict the operations, but keep in mind, as the boiler building comes online, we may not be the provider of those services. We may bring in vendors to provide those services on waterfront. So how services are delivered is not a primary function of the zoning code. The zoning code needs to specify the use. If you feel strongly about, not having a tenant somewhere, you can advise the council of that, but we're gonna end up with some confusing language of the zoning code if we bring that in. That's not usually an appropriate subject matter for a zoning code.
Peter?
Mr. Cohen?
Like Peter, I reacted favorably to the addition of government services, and I would support being more specific to the city of Mercer Island or however that's defined in there.
Okay. Commissioner Haynes?
yeah, I guess I'm okay with having the government services that we have in the parks there now. I'm okay with MIYFS being there now. But as a whole, I don't think that parks are the right place for government services. I think parks are for recreation. So I don't like carving out a specific use of government services if these buildings fell down and we wanted to remodel it and use it for government services, we could get a conditional use permit. But I don't want to, as a blanket statement, say that government services are allowed in our parks. In these so that's where I fall on this.
I will say this. I don't love having our operations in Luther Burbank either. I don't have a choice right now as your city manager. We don't have any other buildings. And we don't have the money to solve this problem, I think, inside of the next 20 to 30 years. So I'm gonna continue to advocate for flexibility for city programs. And there's gonna be another shuffle here. I don't know that YFS will permanently be housed there. The building has safety issues, ingress egress issues. So if there's an opportunity, somehow we may do some restructuring, but this, just to be frank, this is the facility inventory that your city government has to work with right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I do find that really unfortunate because I think we should have a place for parks and recreation. And I think we should have a place for government services. I don't think they should be one and the same, and unfortunately it is right now, for reasons out of our control. But I think going forward, that's not a standard we want to provide for or write our code around. So, I would be in favor of removing these exemptions. Number 2 here, I would be in favor of removing that. And again, if these buildings in 20, 30 years need to be remodeled and used for something at that time, we're probably going to be in a different place then. I hope we are. I hope we have a dedicated space for government services, but I really don't like putting it in our parks code that our parks are for government services. So, I guess I would remove both of these new additions, the exemption E2 and C4.
Okay, well, let's see what the consensus on the commission is. Again, would be to drop C4 under uses permitted, government services in the various buildings at Luther Burbank, and then under building size, number 2, which is the exemption of these same buildings. So,
Yes, although I would leave emergency well buildings in there.
okay, all right, so A, B, and C, but keep D. All right, so go
I guess in a perfect world, I don't disagree with Ashley, but I'm willing to go along with this one for all the reasons that staff has indicated.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, let's go ahead. We've got a suggestion to do the eliminations. All those in favor? Yeah, to eliminate them. Okay, so we're going to keep them in.
One thing I will just remind you all, you have a handoff memo. We're not there yet. As I just noted, I think it is, the city's vision is not to have one of our primary administrative facilities in Luther Burbank Park. You may wish to include a note as the city council is looking at long-term planning for facilities that you'd recommend moving them out of Luther. And I would support that, especially given the intensity of use at Luther Burbank Park. It's a flagship park that already has a lot of activity.
Fair enough, thank you. So Carson, I think we've taken care of the exemptions and so forth. Do you want to go through the code language now, or what's the next step?
So the first addition related to buildings with this latest draft that we just sent this afternoon was, as Commissioner Hay mentioned, the addition of government services, which is the use of those 3 buildings. So we felt that it was important to specify that use And then, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to change this to something along the lines of city government services, as that the current definition of government services in the code includes county and state levels, and I don't think that's the intention here.
However, city is defined maybe with a capital C or something, so it's not
Yeah.
any city.
City of Mercer Island.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, I think we just talked about that one, so I think we're good with that one with the suggestions of narrowing the definition of government services to be Mercer Island focused, yeah.
So the new section here is building size. Before we had just proposed regulations for new buildings and exempted all existing buildings. With the use of the Luther Burbank buildings specifically called out in the uses. And this new section exempting the Luther Burbank buildings down here. We are proposing that these standards that we just discussed in the slideshow apply to all other buildings based on the limit of 500 square feet for individual restrooms, park maintenance facilities, and recreational facilities. And then the limit for multi-purpose facilities, which is a facility that meets any 2 or more of these permitted uses in the park zone. That would be capped at 3,500 square feet in gross floor area. Picnic shelters are included there because those are basically considered buildings under the definition in city code. And we covered those, got a thumbs up from the PRC at the last meeting. And then the only other thing was the exemptions list, which I mentioned a moment ago. So that is the new code language that we're proposing.
And I think on the building size, we're gonna have an addition on the height for the other, but yes.
Yeah, that's correct. We'll come back at the next meeting with a proposal for height.
I think we've already discussed all these, so I think we're good with that language.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So the next item that we'll cover tonight is the draft zoning map. The GIS put together a draft of the new zoning map that will replace the current zoning map in the city code with the addition of the park zone and all of the properties that are proposed to be included within the new zone. All of these properties are mentioned here off to the left-hand side of the screen. And then the image here is a little bit hard to read. I can pull up the PDF version if we'd like to take a closer look at it. But that is a smaller image of the proposed map.
So I was gonna go back to the pros plan inventory of parks and so forth to kind of match up, but so what's not in this list obviously is Aubrey Davis. The utility related pieces. Is there anything else that's not in this list?
South Mercer Playfields is listed in the inventory.
Right,
a
that's school district.
Property.
What's good about the adoption of the park zone is I believe, I'll have to double check this, is once the zone goes live, I think all of the public properties on the island will be either open space zone, park zone, or public institution zone. So that, the school buildings fall under that category as well.
Okay.
What about the one, maybe this isn't a park yet, with the one, it's over at like 91st, 91st? What? It's the one you were hoping to do something to be able to link up a couple of things. It's kind of, yeah.
It's open
Hollerbach.
space.
Open space. It's
Yeah,
Open space.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I just have kind of an ancillary question.
Oh,
I was just curious, When we calculate the number of acres of parks that we have as a city, or we say, we have so many acres per 100,000, or whatever, 2,000 people or something. How do we come up with those calculations? Is it based on our zoning map? Is it based on something else?
It's based on our GIS maps,
Okay.
which will now merge. And we've done it, by the way, we've calculated acreage a couple different ways, so I think we should probably put our heads together and figure out a consistent way to do it. Sometimes when we calculate open space area, we calculate the open space properties and the open space areas in the parks. I think that's, I think that's the way it's done in the pros plan, although my memory's bad, so.
And can you tell me the difference between GIS and zoning map? Just out of curiosity.
Well, the zoning map doesn't reflect any of what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is just a draft. So we use our GIS layers to take the boundaries of the parks and calculate the acreage. It's a, help me out, Elaine.
It's digitized geo-referenced mapping.
Thank
So it makes it a lot easier to calculate square footage based on very exact boundaries.
Okay, I was just curious if by this new zoning map, if we just, and because Aubrey Davis isn't in there, did we just cut down our park acreage by 25%?
No, well,
I mean,
for the pros, for the
officially.
purposes of planning Aubrey Davis Park, for the purposes of park planning, Aubrey Davis Park will still be counted in the park acreage. And this zoning map, by the way, it is now a GIS layer, right? So all of this is being produced out of our GIS system. I'm the worst person to be talking about GIS. I'm just totally butchering what it actually is.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that. So Aubrey Davis is still part of the pros plan, even though it's not officially
Yes.
zoned as park. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about another open space thing, but this gets into trails like at Southeast 59th Street near 84th Avenue that goes down to West Mercer there. Is that in any of this? Is it?
Not yet.
So it's not in open space, it's not here, it's like, it's a connector trail. Okay.
I think that might be private property with a
An easement.
transport, like a
Yeah.
pedestrian easement.
When we started this project, we pulled trails off the list early because we've got so many flavors of ice cream. But I think in the future, we can look at if it's truly an outright, we own it. Where does it belong? Is it most likely falls into the category of right of way. It probably doesn't meet the category of open space or parks, but something we need to look at.
It's got one of the biggest and best crops of skunk cabbage at certain times of the year. Anyway, thank you.
Are you an expert on that topic? Okay.
That's how I get to go.
All right. So do you want to kind of a thumbs up on the zoning map or?
I just have a quick comment
Okay.
before we do that. I just wanted to address Commissioner Hayes' comment a moment ago about park acreage. There is a sentence in the handoff memo that specifies the rough acreage that is proposed to be included in the park zone. And that will be different from the pros plan inventory due to the subtractions of Aubrey Davis Park, Landings, South Mercer, Playfields. So just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for that. If there's no additional observations or questions, everybody comfortable with the zoning map as it's being presented here, the draft zoning map? Okay. Moving on.
All right, the last thing that we have to cover this evening is the draft handoff memo. We'll just give a quick overview and then I can start screen sharing the memo. There were a number of suggested changes or questions that came in the Q&A matrix, some of which we didn't include in the QA matrix, though we still want to cover those comments this evening. So we encourage you to propose any revisions that you see fit this evening. The draft handoff memo covers a number of topics. First of all, it covers the draft park zone development regulations. Just gives a quick overview of all the different sections of the regulations, from the purpose, designation requirements, uses permitted, development standards, and the proposed new definitions. It also covers the draft zoning map, which we just discussed. And then there's also an additional section for recommendations that are outside the scope of the park zone project to address any other recommendations that you may have. So that concludes the slideshow. So I can start screen sharing the memo, and we can start proposing revisions or discussion. Chair.
Okay, so I wanted to do a time check. Paul, what time?
It is 7:10.
7:10. So we've been at this a little over 2 hours. Everybody comfortable? Do you want to do a 10-minute break? That sounds like
fine.
we're. All right, we're going to do 10. So it's now 7:10. So we will resume at 7:20. Thank you. Okay, the Park and Recreation Committee meeting is back in session here. And Carson, what? We were going to bring up the memo, I believe, and
Yeah, we're gonna start with the memo. I'll just go ahead and screen share this. So there were a few questions / comments that were in the that addressed the handoff memo and the Q&A matrix. I can only share one thing at a time, so I don't know if we want to go down the list.
yeah, let's just go
there,
down the
or-
list.
Okay. Before we get into some proposed exemptions from the PRC, we made a couple more edits, just small edits here. One was to add conflicting development regulations here in regards to Aubrey Davis Park. And then this sentence here, the city's use of Aubrey Davis Park is regulated by several turnback agreements and airspace leases between WashDOT and the city. And the new addition here is which give WashDOT authority over all improvements. These agreements are. So those are the two small edits that we had before we get into proposed revisions here.
Okay, does anybody have any concerns with,
I don't have any concerns, but the first one kind of meets the concern that I had when I asked whether legal counsel had taken a look at that sentence, and I appreciate the answer, and that takes care of my question.
okay.
All right, I'll pull up the Q&A matrix here instead of the draft.
Most of these are mine. If you want to keep the memo on, I can.
That sounds
run
good.
Through it, and Jody had one at the end, but most of them are mine. And unless there's other thing, my first one was on page 5. Am I jumping ahead too fast, or is that okay?
No, we'll take your suggestions now. Okay,
Okay.
so page 5.
Yeah, so this relates to item number 12 on the matrix, and it's page 5, impervious surface, 6th line. I just raised the question about whether it would be intuitively clear to somebody why public trails, a reader of this, why public trails and synthetic turf athletic fields are not included in that. And I don't feel strongly about this, but something that says, and I don't know how you do it, maybe a parenthetical, any surface not 100% natural material is considered impervious, or something like that. Because the Parks Commission, the Planning Commission hasn't been sitting in here, and I don't care about the specific words, but public trails in particular is something somebody might say, wait a minute.
How does this proposed language up on screen work? Any parentheses, any surface other than natural soil is considered impervious.
That's fine. And because I think that covers synthetic turf also.
Okay.
You want to get thumbs up on these things, or should I? No.
Let's just keep going.
Keep
Yeah.
going. Okay, so my next one is on page 6. Under landings and street ends, 4th line. This is number 14 on the matrix, where it says, however, it is a best practice to zone land based on its primary use. That struck me as something that I felt more comfortable having leading into that sentence with per staff input. So I'd say comma, or however, comma, per staff input. It is a best practice, and because I'm taking your word for it. So that was that one, and the I and it needs to be changed to lowercase.
Okay.
Or maybe there's a more authoritative reference. You know, for that point.
I think it's probably fine. I can ask the planning director if he has something else he can point me to.
All right, Don.
My last one is is on page 7 under additional recommendations. Second bullet about Island Crest Park. This is number 15 on the matrix. Again, this is a little bit belt and suspenders, but again, for somebody who's approaching this for the first time about Island Crest Park and the potential of being subdivided, I suggested putting at the end of that a comma after open space and adding in, thus ensuring that those areas have the same protections as other forested and critical areas in the city. Just to kind of bring the reasoning behind, the reasoning behind it sort of up in the forefront. So I don't know if people think that's overkill or not, but.
So it would read, upon completion of the subdivision, the open space areas of Island Crest Park should be rezoned as open space, thus ensuring that those areas have the same protections as other forested and critical areas in the city.
That's my suggestion, yeah.
Anybody have any? Oh, Paul.
And I brought this
Vice Chair,
up
yeah.
several times. I don't know why it's not in the matrix. I'm not completely comfortable with that paragraph. I understand all your concerns. But I also think, like we've talked about, other aspects of the park, be it master plans, impervious surface restrictions, I think all your concerns are already addressed. And if we do it here, how many other parks do we have to go back and do that? So from my perspective, I feel that we have adequate protections in the draft park zone that make that paragraph unnecessary. And I don't want to necessarily advise the city council that we think that they should go through the expense of doing something that may not be necessary because of the draft of the park zone as it is.
With all due respect, I mean, we went through this a lot. I mean, this language, not the additional language, but using consider a subdivision, that was a compromise. You know, and.
However, what I
I didn't finish.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that was a compromise. So because my view was we ought to start this process of subdividing right now. And the city manager convinced me that the council wanted the park zone created, you know, by the end of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I thought this was in here. We talked about this at the end of the last meeting.
January.
No, we talked about it in February at the end of the meeting, because that's when we changed some of the language about forested and critical areas. Maybe we didn't talk about it in substantive detail.
Yeah, so, and I reviewed the January meeting, and where I saw it being left off was it was undecided. And it was specifically by Peter suggested that we would talk about it in February, and we did not.
Okay, well, I guess we talk about it in March. And I think we've got a proposal up there that's, and again, this is a memo to the city council, just making a suggestion to separate. The vice chair believes that that should be deleted. And so let's go with that.
Yeah, I have a quick comment on
Oh,
that
sure, I think.
as well. Yeah, that was also my recollection, is that we would discuss it, that, and I, you know, whether or not I feel strongly about this or not, I think in this seat with what we're doing and creating a park zone. It's not our place to tell the council to consider taking away some of the park zone and rezoning it as something else. You know, I think that needs to be a different process. To Paul's point, that I don't think it's our place to direct the council to incur costs to remove our park zone and call it something else. You know, in this seat, we're advocating for the parks, and that sounds like a separate process that may be a good process, but is not involved in our, you know, what we're doing here or in the handoff memo.
So one clarification maybe to the city manager. I've heard, Jesse, I think I've heard you say on other prior occasions that it's really not the purview of this commission to worry too strenuously about the cost issue. It's kind of like, you know, what are your thoughts? And it's really the city council then would make a budgetary decision. Is that an appropriate view or?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's quite the way I said it, but
Well, that's the way I understood it.
yeah, I think you don't direct fiscal decisions of the city. At best, you can make a recommendation. If this is your recommendation, this process does require commitment of funds. And so you need to decide either tonight or at your April meeting if this is the paragraph or the version you want. The council will take it into consideration and determine if it's something that they want to program in the work plan and fund.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you for that. Any other thoughts? I guess what I'd like to do is probably put this to bed. I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. And just kind of, let's see where we end up. But there any other comments to the discussion?
Well, the issue of cost and the issue of that councils, what's within the purview of their authority versus ours. That's why the word consider was in there. It doesn't say should subdivide. And in fact, if it makes you feel more comfortable or anybody feel more comfortable, you could change the second sentence to say, if the subdivision process is undertaken, then da, 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 da. I mean, you know, to sort of keep everything in the hypothetical. But I take it that the first sentence, that's the problem from some people's point of view more than the rest of it.
Well, perhaps some additional language could be added at the beginning that said that this group had extensive discussions reflecting their concern that Island Crest Park includes a large amount of acreage. I don't know how much you could probably put a number in that is in fact more closely related to open space than it is the rest of the park, and that we think that this is a problem that should be addressed, you know, down the road, or encourage the council to take a look at, or something like that, because we are concerned about that. It's you have a park that's essentially bifurcated by a line. On one side, it's developed athletic facilities, and on the other side, it's like Pioneer Park or any of the other open spaces, and it's a substantial chunk of acreage with critical areas and drainages and everything else. And that was our concern, is that the park zone, as we were defining it, really didn't apply to that forested part of the park. So how can we address that? How can we ensure that the forested park with sensitive and critical habitat stays that way over the long haul?
And I'll just remind you about the conversation. You have protections
right
in the city code that cover critical areas. Island Crest Park is one of the only park properties where the forested critical areas lie on the property boundary. It's really the only park that I can see practically something like this could happen. Luther Burbank, it's a non-starter, right?
Right.
Critical areas are all intertwined. So I think that is why this is the one park that where this language was drafted. Ultimately, the staff will support what you want to include in your memo. So I'll leave it to you all to make that decision.
Vice Chair, I mean, if the language that Donna suggests about putting a little bit, making it, I guess, maybe a little even more softer. Does that?
Rory.
Well, I suggested
Well,
that we
but-
point
but
out.
But your suggestion about, instead of upon completion, you know, making
Yeah.
that softer. Does that work for you, or you just want it out, period?
And I want to be clear, I think we need to preserve that area. And there would be nothing that we would suggest does anything opposite than protecting that area. And I think we can actually make it more broad than what's there and just basically say that the forested area of Island Crest Park is a good example of open space within a developed park. And by master planning and stewardship, we should make sure that we are preserving those forested areas within developed parks.
I guess I don't see the substantive difference between that and what's up there, but.
Because I'm not calling for a subdivision and I'm not focusing on Island Crest Park.
Even though the city manager has told us that that's the way it would have to be done. If it were done.
That's what she said was that's the only park.
No,
But-
no, at previous meetings.
If it were to be rezoned, we would need to subdivide it and rezone it. And
Right.
I think what Commissioner Burstein is saying is, I'm not
Rezone.
supportive of doing that,
Right.
but we're still interested in protecting the properties at
Oh, I
the,
see.
the distinct.
I see. What you're-
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of that idea.
Yeah, I think to kind of cut to the chase, it's really either the statement will have something about suggesting a rezoning, however soft or not soft, we want to have that language or not. And once we have that, then we can kind of wordsmith appropriately from there. So suggestion was to eliminate the comment about rezoning, but have some language about, here's a good example of an area with you know, open space characteristics in a park and so forth and so on, but to drop the suggestion to rezone. So is it, though, anybody that's in favor of dropping the suggestion to rezone, thumbs up? Okay, it's-
Yeah.
All right, well, so we've got 1, 2, 3. So those in favor of keeping language in that would recommend consideration for rezone to open space. Rory, you gonna vote?
I'm sorry, what was your?
Well, to rezone.
You're the tiebreaker.
Well, I was kind of ambivalent before. I wouldn't word it exactly that way, but I think we should clearly communicate a concern about this particular park having that division of resources, and if and maybe just say this, the council could consider a subdivision of Island, because of that, the council could consider a subdivision of Island Crest Park and leave it at that.
Which is essentially a
Yeah.
rezone.
Yeah,
All right, well,
we're not directing it.
no,
We're
we're just, it's a
saying
suggestion.
We had this.
It's just a
We had
suggestion.
this concern, we talked about it a lot. And one way of addressing it would be through a rezone. I mean, it has protections in place now, but yeah,
Okay,
I think,
so I'm thinking, Carson, I mean, if you listen to the tape, I mean, I think Don had some suggestions. And I think Rory did too. You could maybe just come back with a draft of that. But I think the principle is that we should consider the motivation is we would consider recommending a rezone or considering a rezone.
I believe all of Commissioner Cohen's revisions are reflected in what's on screen right now, correct? So I believe Commissioner Westbrook had talked about adding something before this sentence, correct?
Yeah, that explain, that sort of introduces the topic. Why is this bullet even there? And it's because we have this particular situation in Island Crest Park and concern about the open space about the park zone not being appropriate for the open space portion of the park.
So essentially some context in why this Island Crest Park is unique in this regard, and the situation at that park.
Yeah, and then I'd probably take out the upon completion of the subdivision
Right.
sentence.
And that's where Commissioner Cohen had some additional suggestion that rather than using upon completion, I think it was can't remember exactly what you said down, but it's on the tape.
So if we added in some contextual lead-in at the beginning. Let me just read this. I'm trying to decide in my own mind how comfortable I am with lead-in language and then just the first sentence. I might be okay with that. That doesn't do what you would want.
But it's a consensus of the commission, so
Yeah.
that's fine.
I think the second sentence there is important because you would want to rezone that as open space, otherwise the subdivision wouldn't.
Doesn't make any
Wouldn't-
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could say thus ensuring that those areas have the same protection as other park properties zoned as open space.
Thus ensuring that those areas have the same protections as properties in the open space zone.
Yeah,
So what's the lead in the sentence?
well, Carson.
We can wordsmith that a
He
little
can
bit.
wordsmith.
Just talking about
It's just
the discussion.
Reflecting the concern, expressing the concern that we had about that park in particular.
Okay.
Commissioner Cohen, did you have any other?
No.
Okay.
Does that work? Does that satisfy
Yeah, I think,
everybody?
well, I'm not sure it satisfies everybody, but I
Well-
think given that the thought was is to have the rezone suggestion, I think that does it.
And then, so what about what Ashley said earlier? About adding in, about taking government services out of the parks eventually, or we recommend that should eventually be something that's not in the parks anymore, as in.
Oh, to put a comment in
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, we can-
You could put a statement in there that we left that in there to reflect current realities, but obviously long-term. Although that building will likely remain an office for park staff as long as it's standing.
But it's not the same to have it be a park
Right.
building as it is the entire.
So this isn't the recommendation itself, but something along the lines of a recommendation to the city council to look into removing government services from anywhere in the park zone in regards to long-term facilities planning.
Is it gonna be clear that that sentence doesn't mean you can't do brush clearing, you can't chop up trees that are dangerous and so forth? I mean, I know what the
Yeah.
reasoning was.
How about this? I'll work with Carson on this sentence. I think we can say a little bit more about Luther Burbank Park, the intensity of the use.
Call it
Right.
Yeah.
government administrative
Yeah.
services or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes me realize that we don't have a definition for government services, right?
We actually have one in the code, I
In
believe,
the-
but it's too broad, so we're gonna have to, it includes like all governments. So we're gonna have to fix that when we come back to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I noticed it's not on this list. So, we don't know exactly what, but yeah, I like adding this because we're kind of writing the code for what our current situation is, but it's not ultimately what we want for the long term.
I definitely agree with that.
All right. You have another one or?
I don't have any more proposed
Okay,
suggestions.
there were no other suggestions. Okay. Last chance for any other suggestions? But assuming you didn't send anything in, I think we're probably good.
All right, commission, we are like staring at that finish line. I think we'll need one more touch with you at the April meeting.
Right.
Just checked with Ryan. It sounds like we don't have much else to cover that night, so we'll keep it brief and look to finalize the code and the handoff memo. And I just want to say thank you again for all your time and work on this.
Well, thank you to Carson and Ryan and Sam, everybody else. Delaney, Kim, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So our last item of business tonight is absences and commissioner reports. Seeing we didn't have any absences, commissioners, do you have anything to report? Commissioner
So,
McCarthy.
I got invited to go watch a little bit of the Little League Baseball tournament that was happening at South Mercer on Saturday. And it was really neat to see all of these 9-year-old little kids running around, having so much fun, and it just being used to its full potential. So well done, guys.
Just a
Sorry.
quick shout out as I was walking through Luther Burbank on one of those nice afternoons a few days ago. I noticed nice new picnic tables and trash cans and stuff down by the swim beach. They look great. Particularly because the old picnic tables were really nearing the end of their useful life. So it was nice to see how fresh and new everything looked down there and ready for a spring and summer season.
Commissioner Cohen.
This relates to absences, and I've mentioned this on the record before, is I'm not gonna be at the next meeting because I've got a family bat mitzvah back east. And I guess if that portion of the handoff memo that we've been spending the last half hour on were to change substantively in its approach, I don't know what I would do. I know what I'd do if I were here. But I guess you know how strongly I feel about this, and if there's any way, I guess I'd like to try to be able to get a sense of whether we're gonna, once the additional language is put in, whether it's gonna be a problem from the point of view of the commission as a whole or not, because I guess if I had to, I'd try to figure out how to call in from an airplane.
Well, so two things. One, we'll get the draft a week ahead of time, so you'll be able to take a look at it and you can, let folks know if you have some issues with that. But I think conceptually, we're gonna have language about a recommendation of a rezone at the core. And we're gonna add some stuff, but I think you should be okay with it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Your absence is noted and we'll
Okay, yeah, I
figure it
just
out.
wanna, not that it wasn't clear already, but I just wanna reemphasize my strong feeling about that, not just on my own behalf, but on all the users.
And I would just like to take a second to, Ryan mentioned it in his report, last Saturday, the Senior Resource Fair, and just to give a shout out to all the staff members, Katie and I'm sure Raven and so forth, that it's a great opportunity for seniors to connect on a variety of opportunities. So thanks for all the good work on that. All right, I think we're ready
So-
to,
One more.
oh, sorry.
One more report. Another great improvement to check out, which I just saw today, is the trail improvements at Aubrey Davis Park. I dropped my son off for baseball and it looks so beautiful. There's brand new trees, big, beautiful trees, beautiful plantings, new grass going in. It looks really nice. So I need to go check out the picnic tables. And if you haven't seen Aubrey Davis Park, go take a look. It looks really nice. So thanks for all the hard work that has been happening to get things ready for spring. It's only March and the parks are looking really good already. So thanks for all of that hard work.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So the next Park and Recreation Committee meeting is scheduled for, a regular meeting scheduled on April 3rd, 2025 at 5 p.m. The time is now 7:51 and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to the commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight.